a quiet waiting room, a forgotten corner of a children's hospital, and a girl who had no idea she was about to change someone's world. Vanessa Williams only came for a job interview. She was exhausted, late, and just looking for a chair to sit in. But instead, she found a silent boy clutching a notebook and decided to tell him a story. What she didn't know, that the boy was Brent, the son of a grieving millionaire, and that his father, Kevin Rom, stood just beyond the doorway listening. One story, told in a whisper, would quietly break open the heart of a man who had forgotten how to feel. Before we dive into the story, comment below where you're watching from. Enjoy the story, everyone. Vanessa Williams didn't know much about children's hospitals. She wasn't sick. She wasn't visiting anyone. She was just there for a part-time job interview, one that promised little pay and even less stability. But when you had rent overdue and a younger sister waiting at home with crackers for dinner, part-time didn't sound so bad. She'd rehearsed what to say, even ironed her second-hand blouse the night before. But buses ran late, boots got soaked, and by the time she made it through the glass doors of Westbrook Children's Medical Center, she was breathless, damp, and very lost. The woman at the front desk barely glanced up. Interviews? 4th floor, South Wing. Family Services. Vanessa nodded, thanked her, and took the wrong elevator. It wasn't until she stepped into a long hallway painted in soft pastels, with clouds and hot air balloons on the walls, that she realized she might be in the wrong place. But the waiting room ahead looked empty. A bench, a water cooler, and silence. No one around to redirect her. Just a boy sitting alone near the window, knees tucked up, holding something in his lap. Vanessa hesitated. Her legs ached, and the bench looked too inviting to ignore. Maybe this was some kind of side corridor. Maybe the staff would find her if she waited. She sat. The boy didn't move, didn't even glance at her. He had sandy hair, a pale gray hoodie, and the kind of stillness that came from being too quiet for too long. In his lap was a blue sketch pad. His fingers drummed it softly, over and over. Vanessa offered a smile, then looked away. She didn't want to scare him off, but something tugged at her. Maybe it was the way his sneakers were untied. Maybe it was the slouch in his shoulders. Or maybe she just saw herself, a younger her, sitting on hard chairs in school counselor offices, waiting for someone to notice. So she said it softly, not loud, not intrusive, just gentle. "Is that a drawing book?" The boy looked up, startled. Not frightened, just surprised, like no one had spoken to him in a long time. He nodded. Vanessa tilted her head. "What do you draw?" He didn't answer at first. Then, a beat later, "Animals. That's cool." She paused. "I used to draw a rabbit named Theo. He wore a pirate hat and had a backpack full of peanut butter sandwiches." The boy's lips twitched, just a little. Encouraged, she leaned forward slightly. "You want to see what happens next?" He blinked. Vanessa took that as a yes. So, without moving closer, she began. "There once was a little rabbit who was tired of running. Everyone thought rabbits were supposed to be fast, always jumping, always fleeing. But this rabbit, he liked to sit still. He liked clouds, and toast, and silence." The boy tilted his head. Vanessa smiled. One day, the rabbit wandered into a garden he didn't recognize. It was quiet, a little too quiet, and sitting in the middle of it was a bear. The boy's eyes widened. He was huge and covered in leaves, and he looked sad. But the rabbit didn't run. Instead, he said, "Hi." The sketchpad shifted in the boy's lap. His fingers stilled. "And you know what the bear said?" Vanessa asked. The boy shook his head. "I forgot how to roar," she whispered. For a moment, the room felt like it wasn't part of the hospital anymore. It was something softer, calmer, like the world had paused. Vanessa kept going. And the rabbit, instead of laughing or getting scared, said, "That's okay. I can show you how to listen first." A quiet breath. From the boy, from the hall, and from someone else. Vanessa didn't notice the man standing just past the doorway. She didn't see his tailored coat or the way his hand gripped the doorframe. She didn't know he'd come back to find his son, only to hear a stranger telling a story that somehow sounded like one his late wife once told. Kevin Rum had never seen this girl before, but her voice, steady, kind, unpolished, cut through the fog he'd been living in for nearly 2 years. He didn't interrupt. He just listened. And inside the room, Brent slowly opened his sketchbook and turned it toward Vanessa. A rabbit, wearing a pirate hat, with a bear beside him, both looking up at the clouds. Vanessa blinked, then laughed softly. "I think you already knew the ending," she said. Brent gave her a rare, small smile. Behind the door, Kevin's throat tightened. Something he hadn't felt in a long time. Something almost like hope, pressed behind his ribs. And for the first time since his wife passed, Brent had drawn something with a smile on it. Brent didn't speak much. Not since the accident. Not since the headlines. Not since his mother's voice stopped echoing through the house. Kevin Rum had tried everything: specialists, speech therapists, therapeutic horseback riding, even a therapy dog. Brent liked the dog. He fed it Cheerios from his palm and occasionally let it nap on his lap. But he didn't talk. Not unless he absolutely had to. So when Kevin stepped fully into the waiting room and saw his son holding up a sketchbook to a stranger, not a nurse, not a counselor, not a therapist, just a girl in scuffed boots, he froze. She was laughing gently, the kind of laugh people don't fake. It filled the room without trying to take over. And Brent smiled. Not a full grin, but enough for Kevin to feel it like a punch to the chest. The girl looked up then and startled. She stood abruptly, brushing her skirt down with nervous fingers. "Oh, I'm sorry," she said quickly. "I didn't mean to. I was just waiting for an interview. I think I sat in the wrong area." Kevin stepped forward, his voice steady out of habit. "It's all right." Brent looked between them but said nothing. Vanessa gestured toward the sketchbook. "He was drawing," I asked. "I didn't want him to feel, ignored." Kevin studied her. She was clearly tired. There was a wet spot on her shoulder where the snow had melted. Her boots had duct tape on one toe, but her voice had a kind of patience money couldn't buy. "What's your name?" Kevin asked. She hesitated. "Vanessa. Vanessa Williams." Kevin nodded. "I'm Kevin, and this is Brent." Vanessa offered the boy a soft wave. "He's a good artist." Brent looked down, cheeks pink. Kevin cleared his throat. "Are you interviewing for the Story Nest position?" She blinked. "The what?" "The pilot storytelling program for outpatient families. We're building something for kids waiting long-term. A space where they can listen, imagine, create." The role was posted yesterday. "Oh," Vanessa frowned. "No. I applied for a janitorial opening. I just wanted something steady." Kevin tilted his head slightly. "But you told a story." Vanessa shrugged, suddenly self-conscious. "It just came out." He looked like he needed one. Brent glanced at her, then looked back at his drawing. Kevin's voice softened. He did. Vanessa didn't know what to say. Her stomach twisted. Was she in trouble? Was he someone important? She nodded quickly. I should go. I'm sorry if I… Wait, Kevin said gently. Would you come back tomorrow? She stared at him. He looked serious, but not cold. Why? She asked cautiously. Because he hasn't smiled like that in a very long time. Vanessa looked at Brent again. He was doodling something in the corner of the page. A rabbit. The same one. Now wearing headphones. A part of her wanted to run. This wasn't her world. The building was too clean. The air too sterile. She didn't belong in places with men in coats and kids with private sketchbooks. But Brent, I don't have a resume for that kind of thing, she said quietly. Kevin smiled. Good. Most people fake those. She almost laughed. Almost. Instead, she just nodded. I can come after my morning shift. Around 2. 2 is perfect, Kevin replied. Brent looked up and gave the smallest nod. Vanessa took that as her real invitation. She left the waiting room with a strange flutter behind her ribs. And Kevin watched her go with a thought he hadn't had in months. Maybe kindness didn't need credentials. The next afternoon, Vanessa returned. This time, she was guided directly to the right floor, but instead of the formal interview room, a nurse led her back to the same quiet waiting area from yesterday. Felt different now. There were pillows on the chairs, a little basket of crayons on the windowsill. Brent was already there, sketching quietly. When he saw her, he scooted over slightly, enough for her to sit beside him. She did. He pushed the notebook toward her without a word. It showed the rabbit again, now building a tiny fort made of toast. She grinned. Theo's been busy. Brent smiled. And from behind the glass, a room Vanessa couldn't see into, Kevin stood watching. Again. But this time not as a man unsure. This time as a father remembering. Later that evening, Vanessa walked home through the slush. Her socks were soaked. Her jacket let the wind in at the seams. But her chest was warm in a way that didn't come from coffee or coats. When she got home, her younger sister Kara was sitting at the small kitchen table, balancing a cracked tablet on a stack of books. Someone gave us muffins, Kara announced, pointing at a paper bag on the counter. Vanessa froze. Who? Kara shrugged. Delivery guy said it was for the mayor of Rabbits. Vanessa blinked. Inside the bag, blueberry muffins, still warm, and a note written in surprisingly neat cursive. Thank you for the story. Brent says the bear is learning to roar again. Kr. Vanessa sat down at the table, eyes still on the note. She didn't understand what this was turning into, but somehow it felt important, and that scared her more than anything. The next week unfolded like something between a habit and a dream. Vanessa came every afternoon after her cafe shift, still in her apron, with flour on her sleeve or a stray coffee bean in her ponytail. She brought stories, some made up, some half-remembered, and some stitched together from bedtime tales she used to tell Kara when they were little and scared of the rain. Brent never spoke much, but he listened, fully, quietly, with a kind of attention that made Vanessa feel like what she was saying mattered. And slowly the rabbit stories grew. There was now a whole cast of characters. Theo the rabbit, Bear who couldn't roar, and now a new friend, Snail, who was terribly slow but always knew the way. Brent drew them obsessively, layering the pages of his sketchbook with soft pencil lines and bright bursts of crayon color. He'd smile at a detail she added, or nudge her notebook toward himself when he wanted her to keep going. But still, he said almost nothing. And Kevin? He kept his distance. Vanessa would occasionally glimpse him standing by the doorway or through the glass partition. He never interrupted, never hovered, just observed, and occasionally sent her a muffin, or tea, or a post-it note with a single line of encouragement. On Friday, she arrived with a cut on her hand. Nothing major, just a slip from the cafe slicer. But Brent noticed. He pointed to the bandage and frowned. "Just a battle wound," she said lightly. "Theo got into a sword fight with a wild bagel." Brent blinked, then reached into his backpack and carefully pulled out a Band-Aid packet. Cartoon-themed, still unopened. He pushed it toward her. Vanessa smiled and took it, swapping it for her dull beige one. "There," she said. "Story approved." Brent gave a tiny, satisfied nod. That night, Kevin waited until she'd left the room before stepping inside. Brent was still sitting on the floor, organizing his crayons. "She likes muffins," Brent said quietly. Kevin froze. Not because Brent was wrong, but because it was the first full sentence he'd said aloud in weeks. "You like her," Kevin said softly. Brent didn't respond. He didn't need to. Kevin sat beside him, watching him sort red from orange. "You can talk to her anytime you want." Brent shrugged. "She doesn't need it." That stopped Kevin. "She talks like she already knows," Brent added, almost to himself. Kevin exhaled. "Yeah, I think she does." Saturday morning, Vanessa received a text. Unknown number. Short message. "Would you join us for lunch today? No agenda. Just thank you. KR." She stared at it for several seconds. Her instinct was to decline. This wasn't her place. This wasn't her circle. She told stories. She didn't do lunches with people who had drivers and office towers and personal chefs. But the image of Brent holding out that Band-Aid returned to her. So she texted back. "Yes, but I'm allergic to awkward silence and anything with truffle oil." She almost regretted sending it. Until the reply came. "Fair. We'll stick to grilled cheese and apple juice." 12:30. The place was quiet, sunlit, and far too beautiful for a Saturday lunch. A private nook inside the hospital's garden courtyard, with a long wooden table and potted herbs along the wall. It didn't feel corporate. Felt safe. Brent sat at one end with a juice box and 3 crayons arranged like utensils. Kevin stood as Vanessa approached. "Hi," he said simply. "Hi," she echoed, suddenly conscious of the tear in her sleeve. "Thank you for coming." She hesitated. "It's just lunch." He smiled. It's more than that to him. She sat across from Brent and offered a soft wave. "Ready to tell me how Theo defeats the dragon with a sandwich?" she asked. Brent passed her a folded drawing. It showed Theo in a chef's hat, holding a sword-shaped sandwich, facing a grumpy fire-breathing baguette. Vanessa grinned. Of course, with pickles of courage. Kevin watched them from across the table, unsure where he fit in this picture. He'd built companies, managed empires, hired the best specialists in the country. But this girl in cafe sneakers and a patchy coat had given his son something no one else had. Not healing, not a cure, just warmth. After lunch, they lingered in the garden. Kevin walked with Vanessa along the herb wall, giving Brent space to color quietly in the sun. "I wanted to ask," he said, "what made you speak to him that day?" Vanessa shrugged. "He looked like he needed a story. I've been there." Kevin tilted his head. "Where?" "The place where silence feels heavier than noise." He nodded slowly. "You're good with words." I'm better with silence, actually. He laughed. A sound even he hadn't heard from himself in a while. Vanessa looked down. This isn't normal for me. I don't usually have lunch in secret gardens with people who wear watches that cost more than my rent. I don't usually invite anyone here, Kevin said softly. Not since. He trailed off. Vanessa didn't press. But he continued anyway. Brent's mother was the storyteller, he said. She had this way of turning any moment into a memory. When she passed, the stories stopped. I think I stopped too. Vanessa met his eyes. That's the thing about stories, she said gently. They wait for you. Kevin blinked. And in that moment, something shifted. He saw her, not as the poor girl from the wrong waiting room, but as someone who'd survived more than she let on. And maybe someone he didn't want to lose. That evening, Vanessa walked home with a brown paper bag in her arms. Leftover muffins Brent insisted she take. Inside was another drawing, tucked between napkins. Theo the rabbit, holding a book titled The Girl Who Knew the End Before the Beginning. Vanessa pressed the paper to her chest and whispered, "He's starting to write his own stories again." The next time Vanessa came to the hospital, something felt different. She couldn't name it, not exactly. But the receptionist smiled at her like she belonged. The elevator didn't creak the same way. The air in the hallway didn't smell like antiseptic anymore. It smelled like crayons, paper, and warmth. Brent was already waiting in the story corner, a new book open on his lap. His eyes lit up the moment he saw her. "I brought a dragon today," Vanessa said, holding up a handmade hand puppet stitched from felt. "But he's shy and allergic to compliments." Brent giggled, and Kevin, watching from the other side of the glass, nearly dropped his coffee. He couldn't remember the last time his son had laughed out loud. It was becoming a ritual. Vanessa's presence in their lives wasn't loud or official. There were no contracts, no titles. But each day she arrived, Brent grew lighter. And so did Kevin. One evening, Vanessa stayed longer than usual. Brent had fallen asleep mid-drawing, curled into a blanket burrito on the beanbag chair. Vanessa tucked a crayon from his hand and sat quietly nearby, sketchbook on her knees. Kevin appeared in the doorway but didn't speak. She looked up and whispered, "You ever notice how kids don't fake sleep like adults do?" Kevin smiled. "They don't know they're supposed to." Vanessa nodded, then tapped her pencil against the page. "You ever think maybe grown-ups need stories even more than kids do?" Lately, every day, silence lingered between them. Not awkward, just full. Full of the things neither of them could say easily. Vanessa finally spoke. "Brent's drawings, they're different now. They used to be lonely. Now they have light, friends, even sound effects." Kevin chuckled. "Yes, he narrated one to me last night. A snail started a band, I think." "Crumble," Vanessa said with a grin. "He plays kazoo." Their eyes met, and for a moment, it felt like they weren't in a hospital at all. Then Kevin's expression shifted. Not colder, just quieter. "I've been meaning to ask," he said carefully. "Would you consider something more permanent here? We've started sketching out the story nest as a full foundation. Not just one room, a whole floor. Reading circles, sketch stations, visiting storytellers." Vanessa blinked. "You mean like work here?" "Not just work," Kevin said. "Shape it. Build it with us. With Brent." Her heart twisted. She wanted to say yes, immediately, but she remembered her rent, her other job, Kara's school form still unsigned at home, the cracked phone charger, the half bag of rice in their cupboard. "I'd have to think about it," she said honestly. "I mean, it sounds amazing, but I'm just me." Kevin stepped forward slightly. "Exactly. You're you. That's why it works." She smiled, touched and terrified all at once. And then Brent stirred on the beanbag, murmuring in his sleep, "Don't forget the warm." Vanessa froze. She turned slowly. Kevin did too. "What did he say?" she whispered. Kevin's face had gone pale. "That's something his mother used to say," he said quietly. "On cold days, when he was nervous." Vanessa looked at Brent. He was still asleep, peaceful, trusting. Something welled in her chest, some feeling too big for words. Kevin didn't speak either. He just stood beside her, not touching, not rushing, just present. Later that night, Vanessa walked home in a daze. The snow had started falling again, soft flakes dusting her coat. Her boots still squeaked when she walked, and her scarf had a hole near the edge. But she didn't feel small anymore. She felt full, and that scared her, because full things break easier. When she got home, Kara was asleep on the couch, a book resting on her stomach. Vanessa made tea quietly, sat down with her sketchbook, and for the first time in weeks, she didn't draw Theo the rabbit. She drew a girl, and a boy, and a man in a scarf with tired eyes and a soft smile. They were sitting in a room made of stories, the walls stitched together from imagination and second chances. She wrote one line beneath the sketch: "Sometimes the room finds you before you know you belong in it." The next morning, everything broke. Vanessa had just finished her shift at the cafe when she got the call. The landlord. They were behind again, more than she thought. She had 1 week before the lock changed. No second chances, no extensions. And that very same afternoon, the hospital shifted too. When she arrived at the usual room, it was empty. No Brent, no crayons, just a sign on the door: "Under renovation. Please visit admin office for info." Panic bloomed in her chest. She ran to the front desk, breathless. "Where's Brent?" The woman blinked. "Brent Rom? He's fine, ma'am. His father pulled him from the outpatient sessions for now. They'll be out of town for a while." "Out of town?" No note, no explanation, just gone. Vanessa stood in the hallway, frozen. She felt foolish, like she'd imagined it all, like the warmth had never been hers to hold. That night she didn't sleep. She sat on the floor of their apartment, surrounded by laundry and fear. Then her phone buzzed. A text. Unknown number. "He left something for you. Check the mailbox. KR." She ran down the stairs barefoot, not caring about the cold tiles or the broken hallway light. Inside the mailbox was an envelope. No return address. Inside, a single folded drawing. It showed Theo the rabbit, and Crumble the snail, and a girl with wild hair and taped-up boots. Beneath them, a line in careful handwriting: "The story isn't over. It just needed a page break." Vanessa pressed the paper to her chest, the snow beginning to fall outside. And for the first time that day, she let herself cry. Not from pain, from hope. The next 3 days passed like fog. Vanessa still showed up for work, poured lattes, smiled at customers, and swept under tables with robotic precision. But her mind wasn't there. It kept drifting to Brent's laugh, to the rabbit in his sketchbook, to that last line: "The story isn't over. It just needed a page break." But what did it mean? Had they moved? Had Kevin changed his mind? Had she imagined the whole thing? Felt something real in a place where she never truly belonged? Then came Thursday. It started like any other day. Cold toes, cracked phone screen, Kara's hoodie worn inside out again. But at 3:14 p.m., just as Vanessa was cleaning out the pastry case, someone tapped on the cafe's front glass. She looked up, and there he was, Brent, with snow in his hair, holding a drawing rolled up like a scroll. Kevin stood behind him, scarf loose around his neck, face unreadable. Vanessa dropped the cloth in her hand and stepped outside. Brent said nothing. He simply handed her the scroll. She unrolled it. It was a map. A crude, colorful, oddly detailed map, labeled the Story Nest, with arrows pointing to things like Crumble's Castle, Muffin Keep, and Vanessa's voice tower. In the corner was a stick figure version of her, with a crown made of pencils and a cape made of notebook paper. Beneath it, Brent had written in block letters, "Can you help build it?" Vanessa stared at the words, then at him, then at Kevin. "I didn't want to do this without asking you," Kevin said quietly. Brent didn't want to either. Vanessa blinked. You're building it? For real?" Kevin nodded. "Ground floor. We got approval 2 days ago. Quiet launch, no press. Just crayons. And people who matter. And you want me to? To shape it," he said. "To tell the first story. To be the first name on the wall." Vanessa didn't know what to say. Brent tugged her sleeve gently. She looked down. He was holding another note. In his handwriting, "We need you. The rabbit said so." She laughed, shaky, then burst into tears right there on the sidewalk. Not because of fear, not because of exhaustion, but because no one had ever said the word need to her without asking for something in return. She crouched down to Brent's level and whispered, "Only if I get a crayon crown too." He nodded solemnly. "Deal." That night, she brought the map home and pinned it to their living room wall. Kara gasped when she saw it. "You're going to be the queen of stories?" Vanessa smirked. "Only on Tuesdays. Thursdays I still do dishes." Kara traced a little snail trail on the map. "They made this for you?" "For us," Vanessa said quietly. "He's building a place where stories can live, and he asked me to help. Are you gonna say yes?" Vanessa didn't answer right away. Instead, she took a blank sheet of paper, sat down, and began to draw again. Not Theo, not the bear. This time it was a door, open, waiting, and a girl just about to step through it. 2 weeks later, the doors officially opened. No ribbon cutting, no news cameras, just kids, paper, stickers, and joy. The Story Nest was real. Soft lighting, beanbags, colorful murals. A small stage with a microphone Brent refused to stand behind, but that didn't stop him from taping drawings to the edge. Vanessa walked in slowly on the first day, fingers trailing along the wall where the first donor plaque hung. In honor of Brent, who taught us how to listen. Below it, on a smaller sign, Director of Story Programs, Vanessa Williams. She stared at it for a long time, then looked toward the reading corner. Brent was there, with a paper crown. He waved. So did Kevin. He didn't wear a suit, just jeans, a hoodie. He was folding juice boxes into tiny chairs for stuffed animals. Vanessa exhaled. This was real. She belonged. She stepped to the center of the room, cleared her throat, and said, "Okay, who's ready for a story about a dragon who forgot how to roar?" Every hand flew up. Brent raised his pencil like a sword, and Kevin watched, his eyes soft, his heart finally, quiet. That evening, after the last child had left, Vanessa stayed behind to clean up juice spills and glitter. Kevin appeared beside her with a stack of crayon caps in one hand. "I had a meeting today," he said casually. "Boardroom, big windows, cold coffee. Sounds like a dream," she muttered, tucking in a chair. He smiled. "I spent most of it thinking about whether dragons prefer apples or bananas." She looked up. "Bananas," she said confidently. "They peel easily. Less mess on scales." Kevin laughed. The kind of laugh that sounded like it hadn't seen daylight in years. She watched him quietly. "You okay?" she asked. "I am now." Silence. And then he added, "Are you?" She considered that, then nodded. "Yeah, I think I am." Kevin reached into his pocket and pulled out something small. A napkin, folded. On it was a child's drawing of 3 stick figures, one small, one tall, and one wearing a paper crown. Underneath, not the end, just the next chapter. Vanessa touched it gently and smiled. The first real snow of winter came softly. No wind, no sleet, just silent flakes dusting rooftops, blanketing benches, catching on scarves and eyelashes without a sound. Vanessa stood by the tall windows of the story nest, a cup of cocoa warming her hands. Behind her, kids tumbled over beanbags, pencils in their fists, inventing worlds out of clouds and paper scraps. Brent was somewhere under a blanket fort, narrating an epic battle between Sir Crumble and the evil cereal box. She smiled. The room was alive, and for the first time in her life so was she. A hand brushed hers gently. Kevin, wearing a coat dusted with snow, hair tousled, a smudge of glitter near his collar he hadn't noticed yet. "Cookies," he said, lifting a brown paper bag. "Brent says it's a snow day. Apparently that requires double chocolate." Vanessa chuckled. "It's in the handbook." They moved quietly to the break room, slipping away from the chaos. Kevin leaned against the counter, unwrapping the cookies like he was handling treasure. "This place," he said, looking around. "You gave it a heartbeat." Vanessa raised an eyebrow. "Pretty sure Brent's sugar intake is the real source of energy here." "I'm serious," Kevin said. "You didn't just show up. You stayed. Even when it got messy. Even when I pulled away. Even when I didn't know how to ask you not to leave." Vanessa's hands stilled. She met his gaze. "What are you saying?" Kevin exhaled. "I'm saying, I don't want this to end in a quiet goodbye or another napkin drawing. I want to keep building this. Not just the nest. Everything." She blinked. "You mean?" "I mean a home. A real one. With coffee mugs and story nights. With mistakes and patience and whatever this is becoming." Vanessa's throat tightened. She had dreamed of so many things growing up. A warm bed. A day without counting change. Someone who looked at her and saw more than survival. She never dared imagine she'd get all 3. She didn't answer with words. She stepped forward and kissed him. Not quick. Not nervous. But steady. Warm. Sure. He kissed her back, careful like he was still learning how. When they pulled apart, he said, "So, Crumble gets a co-author now." She grinned. "Only if he agrees to snack breaks." 3 months later, Brent officially published the first volume of the Crumble Chronicles at the Nest's book launch event. The room was overflowing with kids and juice boxes and crowns made of foil. Vanessa introduced him to the crowd, calling him the boy who reminded us that stories are just another way to say, "I'm still here." Brent beamed. He gave her a small, folded card afterward. Inside was a single sentence in his best handwriting. I used to be quiet because I was scared. Now I'm quiet because I'm listening. Vanessa cried in the staff lounge for 10 minutes after reading it. Kevin found her there, offered her tea, and said, "That's the thing about you. You never needed to shout to be heard." She wiped her eyes and replied, "Neither did you." Their apartment was small but full of light. Kara had her own room now, decorated with glittering constellations and a beanbag shaped like a moon. Brent stayed over on weekends, often dragging his entire art kit in a suitcase that barely closed. Vanessa's desk sat by the window, overlooking the street. On it were crayons, pencils, a warm mug, and the original rabbit drawing, framed, creased from where she'd once held it to her heart. It reminded her every day where the story started. Not in the nest, not with Kevin, but in the wrong waiting room, on the right day, when someone small needed a story, and someone tired decided to tell one. The next snowfall came while Brent and Kara were building a blanket kingdom in the living room. Vanessa stood by the window again, watching the flakes fall in slow motion. Kevin stepped up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "You ever think about that day?" he asked. "All the time," she said. "If you hadn't gotten lost, if I hadn't sat in the wrong room, if you hadn't told that story." She turned to face him. "I didn't tell it for you." He nodded. "I know, but you were listening anyway. I always will." They kissed again. The kind that didn't end a story, just turned the page.